Hello, my name is Peder Sandqvist. I'm a creative technologist at DigitasLBi, and I'm here today to talk about virtual reality. At Digitas, we're always curious about what's next, and we believe that virtual reality is one of the technologies that will shape our future the coming decades. A platform that will transform how we interact and how we experience life itself. VR is the next big platform. There's a lot of numbers and projections floating around. What we can say for sure is that virtual and augmented reality will become big business very soon. What is really the difference between virtual and augmented reality? What is VR and what is AR? It's really quite simple. In VR, you block out the world and you place the world you're in with another world. So you basically teleport yourself into another reality. With AR, you actually layer virtual objects in between you and the real world. So AR is sort of a see-through technology where I look through a visor and I will be able to place objects within this room with all of you here. Whereas with VR, I actually replace the room completely. And my presentation today will focus on virtual reality as it's a much more mature technology at this point. So looking at VR, it's really important to distinguish between different content creation and delivery technologies. There is a huge difference between virtual reality and virtual reality. So this phrase is being used to describe a number of different experiences that are profoundly different. I usually say that there's two types of VR, and the first type of VR is what I would call real VR. So this is a full three-dimensional virtual world rendered in real time by a very powerful computer. And in this type of VR, you have unrestricted movement and the ability to interact with the world that you're in. So you can walk around, look at things, you can pick things up, and you could play tennis or do whatever you feel like doing in that world. It's like a computer game, but you're in the game. The other type of VR is based on spherical video capture. So you use a special camera that films in all directions, and when you're viewing this footage, you turn into the camera. So you're basically, your head is mounted on a tripod, and you're free to look around. This type of VR doesn't require powerful computer hardware to be played back. So you can view it on a low-end mobile phone and use it in, for example, a cardboard application. The difference here is that you have no interactivity at all. It's just a totally passive experience. Even though I wouldn't say it's real VR, I would call it immersive video, it's still very powerful. Imagine this being used for live streams. You could sit front row at the Wimbledon finals and stuff like that. Even though you can't really interact, it can still be a very, very strong experience. So looking at the hardware for VR today, I tried to divide it into small, medium, and large, and we also have extra large. The small part of VR would be Google Cardboard, so it's something very simple. It's a flat pack. It's basically so cheap that you can give it away. And you just slide your mobile phone into this thing, and you can enjoy different immersive experiences. Here, content is mostly video-based, and you don't have any interaction model more than having hotspots that you can look at, and when you look at these hotspots, you trigger actions. The medium-sized VR is a custom VR headset for a specific mobile phone, such as the Samsung Gear VR. You have more feeling of immersion, and you can do both like video-based experiences, but also gaming that are interactive, that you actually can control with a gamepad, basically. And then you move into the large size VR, and that's where you have more stationary installation. You run it from a computer, you have cables going up to the headset, and you can have very immersive experiences. But here, you still interact with a gamepad. You don't really have a way to use natural interaction. But then we move into the XXL experiences, and here you actually have room-size VR, so you can move around, do whatever you like. You just interact by using your hands as you would in the real world. It might not sound like a big difference, but in reality it is a huge difference in terms of how immersed you feel. And immersion is very important in order to achieve emotional impact, and this is what we're always looking to do with VR, is to make you really feel something. And with VR we have the ability to really do that in a way we haven't seen with other mediums. How easy it is to create this emotional impact actually follows the platforms. But of course, reach and scale is much harder to achieve on the HTC Vive, because that is something that just, gamer geeks will buy that this year. Next year it may be more gamer geeks will buy it, and it will take time before that is something, people transform their home cinemas into VR rooms. That will take a while. Whereas with the cardboard, you can do like New York Times did this fall and just distribute it to all your clients. The New York Times actually sent out 1 million cardboards to all their subscribers, and then they push content through that. So you have these different platforms, you need to balance these in some way. But you could still create experiences for trade shows and more static installations, pop-up stores. You could use like these really immersive VR experiences for that, and then you could have reach with cardboard, and you could interconnect these experiences and push them and make them work together. We actually started working with VR around 3 years ago. I have been working with 3D for a long time, so we were very curious to see how we could use VR to actually create some value for some of our clients. We're also at this point where more and more brand interactions go digital and more products are sold online. So there's this increasing need to let people experience and make emotional connections with products that they have no physical access to. So with this in mind, we started experimenting and see if we could actually place people inside a virtual car. And the rendering you see here is actually one of our first experiments with the Oculus Rift DK1, where we actually try to replicate a car and put people in that car. The results were intriguing. It wasn't really immersion, but you could really have this sense of this is quite interesting. We actually showed this to Volvo, and they were intrigued as well. And they came back to us and they asked us, how can we pre-sell a car that doesn't exist? So the launch plan for the XC90 involved presenting the interior of the car prior to the exterior. And then they would launch the full car a few months later and sell a number of early edition cars online. And keep in mind that this is a $1 million kroner product, and it would be sold directly from the campaign website. So it called for ways to present the product, and we believed a really strong VR experience could be one way to do this. So I'll just show you a short case video to give you some background.
How do you make the world's safest car brand take a risk? How do you sell a car that doesn't exist yet? How do you not only launch a car, but relaunch a brand? We started by finding the perfect owners for the all-new XC90 First Edition, making this the first digital campaign that doesn't wait for the right customers, but actively finds them. People like the founder of Spotify, Daniel Ek, Google Glass designer Isabel Olsen, film director John Woo, founder of Badu, Robin Lee. We created a virtual test drive, using Oculus Rift to create a completely immersive and unique 3D experience, allowing people to explore a car that hasn't been produced yet. People experienced the car in a digital showroom. This site made people feel confident buying a car they couldn't physically experience. The clean and elegant design expressed Swedish luxury. The XC90 First Edition was sold exclusively on the campaign website and even on Facebook. The webshop opened on the 3rd of September 2014, with the last car sold 47 hours later. At its peak, we sold 7 cars a minute. This unique global car launch ignited conversations and news coverage across social media, forums, and news outlets around the world. Not only reinventing how you market a car, but transforming an industry. Creating what's next for Volvo.
And the results were quite staggering. We actually sold 150 million euros of cars in less than 48 hours. And even though we did this experience for the pre-launch, we also looked at the bigger picture. How could this VR experience be integrated in a lot of different venues where Volvo would be presenting the car moving forward? We wanted to give the experience a long and healthy life. So we started to look into other areas. And trade shows and car shows is a place where this experience could have a lot of impact. And looking at car shows, they can basically be described with cars and people everywhere. Car brands bring their complete car lineups. They put them up for show in combination with free drinks and some technical gadgets, and they pray for attention. So how could we stand out in this cloud of conformity? Volvo's way of doing this was by moving in the other direction. And they made a bold bet by placing only one physical car in their huge Paris Motor Show area. So it was just one star player on display, and it was the all-new XC90. Even though this was a huge success, visitors flooded the Volvo area, but it also meant that the one and only car on display was constantly swarmed by people throughout the show. It was people climbing all over the car, and it was really hard to get access to this one car that was on show. But using VR, we felt that we could provide a very compelling alternative and put 4 more cars on display. So you basically just walk into this beautiful, quiet, perfectly climate-controlled room, and you can escape to the tranquility of the Swedish countryside and experience the XC90 like magic in total solitude. But what kind of VR experience could we create to support this vision? We actually created an experience that was very static, was very mellow, but we had some strong elements in there to make you experience something that you could never experience without VR. We did a lot of interesting animations. We built the car around you, so we did a little play on the design around you, brand values of Volvo. Even though we did all these things, the most interesting thing in the VR experience was something much smaller. And it's this little butterfly here. It might not look like a big thing here, but in our VR experience, it's paramount. And it's one of the things that visitors relate to and remember. And you want to reach out and you want to touch this little butterfly. And what we've seen this far in branded VR is a lot of high-velocity game-style experiences where you go in roller coasters and different type of action-paced experiences with explosions and things like that. And it's not that surprising because gaming is one of the main drivers of VR exploration today, and presented with the limitless opportunities of VR, one tends to want to do the most extreme. But what we saw was that it's not the type of experiences that actually make you feel most immersed. What we saw was that the experiences that make you feel most immersed are the small and nuanced details that you can actually instantly relate to. To do this, we feel that it's really important with VR to dare to be gentle, to dare to do fine-tuned things and not try to do the most extreme. When something is not quite right in VR, you react way stronger than in other mediums. So, for example, if you're looking at a website and the font size is a little bit off, or you're watching a movie and the lighting is a little bit off, you don't react so strongly. But in VR, even the smallest things that aren't really quite right really make you feel really bad. So it's very important to have this in mind and create these experiences that are very, very fine-tuned. One thing to keep in mind here is that it's really important to avoid camera motion. We see a lot of experiences, doing a car experience, it's quite expected that, of course, you will be driving the car. But if you're driving the car, you will start feeling sick. You go to a big car show or something like that, and you stand in line for 2 hours to do a VR experience, and you're all excited. And you get to wear this VR headset, and you're on a space roller coaster, and 15 seconds later you feel sick, and then you feel sick for 5 hours. Maybe that's not the best way to present your brand to your fans. It's also very important to use hinting to guide the visitor. Today, most people that try out VR are beginners. They've never done VR before. So you want to be a little bit over the top in terms of guiding them throughout the environment. Use a lot of visual and audiovisual hints to direct attention and make people actually see the things you want them to see in the experience. Of course, 3D sound is a great way to do this. It's really important to make sound part of storytelling. So if something is happening behind the viewer, it's really important to position that sound so that you actually feel that it's coming from behind. You turn around and you look, and you can see that little interaction in the experience. When creating VR experience, you tend to focus a lot on the virtual side of things. In all of this, I think it's very important not to forget about reality. For Volvo, we actually built this custom room where you could really enjoy the VR experience and feel safe. So it was a closed room. You could put your purse next to you without being worried about somebody stealing it. And we worked with climate control, so the temperature in the room would match the temperature in the VR experience. And you can also add additional things like wind and smell to even add more qualities of immersion to the experience. And creating this setup takes way more work than you think. So really spend a lot of time on planning and setting that up if you're doing public VR executions. In the Volvo case, we ended up seeing some tremendous results, and at all the car shows we show up with the VR experience, we end up with a 1 to 2 hour line. At the Paris Motor Show, the Volvo stand was awarded Best in Show, and the experience has continued to be part of all major car shows that Volvo has attended ever since. For mobile events, we also designed and built a custom module where we integrate all the hardware and real seat from the car. And here it's quite interesting because this seat here is perfectly matched to the seat in the VR experience. So like when you turn around and you bump your shoulder into the seat, you will have this physical connection between the real world and the VR world, which is really quite interesting in terms of immersion. This system has toured the world as part of the race village at all the Volvo Ocean race ports throughout the world, and it's still touring the world for invite VIP events at flagship dealers around the world. Of course, we're not only working with Volvo, we have been working with Dior. This summer we worked together with our Paris office to create a way for Dior to connect to their fans. And we actually created a bespoke Dior designed and branded VR headset called Dior Eyes. And we then filmed 360 VR footage backstage at their fashion shows. So now Dior fans can sit first row right next to people like Karl Lagerfeld and George Clooney and experience their fashion shows. All just by walking into one of their top 25 flagship stores all around the world. We've also been working with Reebok and Vice News. They have been creating a number of sports documentaries about athletes in non-traditional sports. As part of creating those documentaries, they also captured 360 footage. So using the Reebok VR app, you can actually step into the shoes of these athletes and experience what they are doing. Looking at industrial use, we think that companies doing products for extreme environments that are kind of difficult to communicate could use VR to actually take their customers to the places where their products make a huge difference.
We invest far-off places with a certain romance. The appeal, I suspect, has been meticulously crafted by natural selection as an essential element in our survival. Long summers, mild winters, rich harvests, plentiful game. None of them lasts forever. Your own life, or your band's, or even your species might be owed to a restless few, drawn by a craving they can hardly articulate or understand, to undiscovered lands and new worlds.
So imagine the impact as a company doing products that actually are in these environments, to be able to actually put people in those places. It could be space, deep sea, Arctic exploration, or anything you can imagine. And even though you might be creating products that on paper not look so exciting, imagine being able to actually take people to the environments where these products make a profound difference. Of course, travel will be affected by VR in a lot of ways. The things you think about instantly is the fact that if you're going somewhere, you could have a VR preview, and that will happen quite soon. You know, you log into travel websites, and they will have a small cardboard button, and you hold up their site, and you can view the hotel room, you can view the beach. But I think that VR will have even more impact on the travel industry as teleportation actually becomes real. So maybe you don't even need to travel. Maybe we can create experiences that are even better than travel. You can travel to other worlds and so on. And I think if the travel industry would adopt this and actually be part of creating these experiences, I think there's huge business opportunity for that business to be a part of this development instead of like stepping away and being afraid of it. So embrace that disruption, and I think the travel industry has a lot to gain. Of course, education is something that will be affected by VR. I think VR has the ability to instill empathy. So instead of having a boring history teacher reading out of a book, you could actually experience Gettysburg. And imagine the kind of emotional impact that would have compared to reading about it in a book. Of course, you could also do all sorts of interactive experiences where you actually craft things in VR in order to understand how things work in the real world. So that'll be huge. Doing VR, we think that consumers will expect meaningful VR experiences. So we believe it's really important to use VR only when and where it makes sense. So don't use it for the sake of doing VR. You know, find a place within your business and within whatever you do where you can actually use VR to make a difference. It's really important with VR to invest in excellence. People really love good VR, but you really can't stand bad VR. So it's a little bit binary. You do VR, you really invest and make great VR, or you don't. Looking at timing, I think for brands, it's really interesting timing now to invest, explore and experiment and become a leader within this area. You know, we saw maybe 15, 20 years ago when Red Bull moved into content marketing. I think there will be brands that do the same with VR the coming years. It's also important to not think of VR as a one-off activity. You do a VR thing here, you do a VR thing there, and they're not interconnected or tied into your bigger strategy. So looking forward, as VR is a paradigm shift in communication, we believe that you need a long-term strategy to actually integrate VR into your business models to succeed with VR. You might be a little bit stressed out by all the talk about VR and its articles everywhere, and you know, I've been in this for several years now, and it will not happen overnight. There's a lot of technical challenges, there's a lot of social challenges in terms of using VR, and we're still very early in this development towards VR. I'd say right now we're even before the early adopter stage, so it's just all innovation, experimentation. It's early days, and we feel that if you move into this space now, you can have a head start that is really, really valuable. But don't be too stressed out. It will take time. So you don't need to do it today, but you need probably to start learning about the technology and getting more up to speed in terms of what is happening around this technology in order to be adaptive when this happens. To sum things up, I'd like to talk a little bit about the seeing is believing mantra that has been around for quite some time. We believe with VR, seeing is believing is dead, and feeling is believing is the new paradigm. Thank you all, and have fun.